in the time we've been doing this show,
Yeah.
the F-22 has gone from rolling retirement to the Air Force's top priority.
Right.
So basically, if you go down to the article there, Doug, so they obviously have only 183, and they were talking about cutting 32 of the early model
the older
F-22s,
ones,
the old
right.
Raptors, the older block. But now they're talking about upgrading, and this is wildly speculative, right? This is not. There's nothing right now. I think the only thing is in FY25, they're actually going to retire some of the Raptors. But now Congress is kind of intervening in some of the programs and acquisitions in the Air Force. And they're basically saying, well, could we upgrade these things? So, I mean, they're 20-year-old airplanes, though. And that's the thing that was surprising to me is,
right.
or there will be 20-year-old airplanes. I mean, so 2006, 2009. Does it say when they finally stopped producing them? It says the older ones were in the late 90s and early 2000s, but I don't know if it says exactly how, but it doesn't matter. Really and truly, that's an airframe that you want to keep going, because until you have the NGAD fighter, what do you have?
Well, to me, man, it's incredible. You got 50-year-old F-15s.
Yeah.
And I've, this is actually when this article came out, it's the first time I've ever heard of them kind of, like you said, speculative, reversing course on the whole, what's going to be, what equipment they're going to have for future air dominance. In my mind, and I think you'd agree with me, the F-22 is clearly by far the best air dominance fighter in the world. Why would you want to get rid of it? And I understand the older ones needed upgrading, and because if you remember the students flying them in the B course, like one of their complaints was when they go operational, it's kind of like going to a whole nother airplane, right? Because they were different. But if you can continuously update an F-16, an F-18, if you can go take the F-15C and make it the EX, like, I don't understand why you can't keep the F-22 relevant, especially it's such a purebred airplane for is designed for a specific mission and does it incredibly well. And they spent a lot of money making that happen. I don't understand why you would want to get rid of that, because really you don't have anything to replace it with. And the whole NGAD thing. Yeah. But realistically,
we've seen this. We've watched this one before. Yeah. We know how it ends.
Yeah. It ends. NGAD's not going to be around until we're really old men, right? So, like you said, Mover, 20 years.
It's not even 20 years. So the last one's rolled off the line in 2011 ish, right? So I mean that's.
Yeah. So by modern standards, 20 years is not a long time for an airframe.
There's the argument of should modern standards be 20 years? You know what I'm saying? Like we've talked about this before too, is 20 years is too long.
Well, it could be too long, but then you ask yourself the question, okay, what else is better?
Yeah. Well, and it's, I was internally arguing this, as I was thinking about it, because I'm like, well, they're not building them right. So parts are a problem. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. When's the last time they built a B-52? When's the last time they built an A-10? Now, granted, we're getting rid of the A-10, but the B-52 is going to be here long after we're both dead. And not because we're all happy. Right. We're all happy. We're talking old age.
I'm real happy.
It'll be flying in the 2100s.
Right.
But what I'm saying is you can, especially in the world of 3D printing and, other manufacturing processes and stuff, we can make parts, or we can find parts and upgrade parts. So I think you're right if we spend the money to do it. And what's interesting, have you ever heard of the test center out at Tucson for the Guard?
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of cool. I think you should give the F-22 to the Guard. And here's why. The common case study on this, right? So the F-16 predominantly on the Guard Reserve was a block 30, which and the active duty was flying block 40s and 50s. And the time to do an upgrade for the active duty on the block 40 and 50, because they had to go through standard supply chains and standard contracting and stuff like that took far longer than the Guard Reserve that went to the test center at Tucson, and they would contract out using Ingria money or other reserve specific Guard specific money, and they would upgrade the jets. They would call it the SCU. And you could get a new SCU software update pushed faster than the active duty can. Now, I think there's a lot more parity now than it used to be. I mean, we're talking 15 years ago, I'm talking about. But my point is, in some ways, it's better to hand these jets off and say, well, if we don't want them anymore, we'll give them to the Guard, because we do have a problem in the Guard right now, because a lot of Eagle squadrons are starting to go, well, what's next? And they haven't officially said EX or F-35 or whatever. So there's a kind of, in fact, they just turned one of them into a cyber unit, which is like, they went A-10s to cyber. But what I'm saying is, you give them to the Guard where they have a little bit more flexibility to keep updating and upgrading these jets if the active duty doesn't want to spend the money on them and they want to start transitioning towards the next fighter. It's a perfect scenario for that. But I agree with you, from a national defense side of things, you want those to remain in your inventory, whether they're frontline or somewhere, because that technology is still going to be relevant. And that jet was so far ahead of its, I mean, dude, that thing is still
it's incredible,
cutting edge today and can still be upgraded.
I think the big problem is they only made 183 of them. I mean, at some point, you know, at some point you're going to start cannibalizing stuff, right? And what was it? They were supposed to build 700 plus of them, right? They were supposed to replace all the Eagles with them, right? So, I mean, if they would have done that, no chance they're going to retire them. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't see why you'd retire your best horse when I think I'd argue it's in the air-to-air game. It's probably in its prime.